Dear students, dear parents, thank you for joining Easy Edu, your way to success. In this video, I'm going to talk about the SAT exam. So please stay with us. In this video, I'm going to familiarize our students with the SAT components. The SAT tests students in two subjects, English and Maths. So let's see the components of the SAT. The English paper consists of two papers, the reading test and the writing and language test. As for the Maths test, we have one portion which includes no calculator and another section with a calculator which is allowed. The essay in English is optional. So for the reading test, we have 65 minutes to answer 52 questions on different texts. The writing and language test also includes different passages with 44 questions to be answered in only 35 minutes. As for the Maths exam, paper 1, which is not with a calculator, consists of 20 questions in 25 minutes, and the Maths section, which allows the calculator to be used, includes 38 questions to be done in 55 minutes. The essay, which is optional, takes around 50 minutes, and it is only one question, which is about a reading passage. In this video, I'm not going to talk about the Maths exam because it's not my specialty, but rather I'll be talking about the English paper. The English paper consists of a reading section and writing and language section. Now let's see the reading section and the types of questions that will be included in this part. There are different questions to be tested in the reading section. One of these questions or skills is to determine the explicit meaning in passages. This is a very simple task, as students have to locate the information in the passage, which is normally clear and evident to students. An example of such questions could be, for example, you have a text about Mr. Pontellier. Now the question says, Mr. Pontellier's conduct in this passage could most likely be described as generous, good-natured, passionate, or self-centered. Students need to find the information which tells them whether Mr. Pontellier is generous, good-natured, passionate, or self-centered. The information given in the text will explicitly show what kind of person he is. Another skill that students will be examined in the SAT is determining implicit meaning as opposite to the previous one. The previous one was explicit, and now it is implicit, meaning that it is not clearly indicated in the passage, but students need to understand what's behind the lines. An example of such a skill is, how does the author of this passage most likely feel about Trump's comments on Twitter? Of course, the author's comments on the passage are not clear, but we can deduce, we can understand from his comments that she is, or for example, A, she finds Trump's comments laudable and important, or she finds Trump's comments irrelevant and pointless, or she is distrustful of Trump's comments, or she is subtly disdainful of Trump's comments. Depending on the content of the passage, we need to understand what attitude the writer has towards Trump's comments. So we have seen determining explicit and implicit meanings in passages. Another skill which is to be evaluated in the reading section is analogical reasoning. By analogical reasoning, we mean that the reader has to make a comparison or a relationship between the ideas in the text. For example, let's see the question. Based on the excerpt, that is the passage, which of the following behaviors would Socrates most disdain? So the text is going to talk about Socrates, but in different contexts. Which context among these, the choices, the philosopher Socrates would most disdain? Either A, a teacher corrupting his students, or the worship of false gods, or registered voters neglecting to cast their ballots, or students returning library books late. All these choices are far away from the text, but if we understand the character of Socrates, we would probably find to which of these contexts or behaviors he would most disdain. Another category of the reading questions is citing textual evidence. An example of such questions would be, based on the passage, what is the reason that animals in zoos can potentially exhibit violent behavior? Here we need to find textual evidence which shows the reason that animals in zoos can potentially exhibit violent behavior. And we have 4 choices. Either these animals have psychiatric disorders, or these animals are traumatized by the demands of their trainers and keepers, or these animals suffer from severe phobias, or these animals seek to disrupt what they perceive as the unreal world around them. So the text should normally give examples why animals behave violently in zoos, and this should be mentioned in the text. This is what we call citing textual evidence. There should be an evidence, a proof that animals in zoos are potentially exhibit violent behavior. Next, we have determining main ideas. We need to read a passage and determine its main idea or main topic. For example, here the question says, what is the main idea of the second paragraph? It could be about a paragraph or about the whole passage. Now here, the question specifies a portion of the text, which is the second paragraph. In the second paragraph, what is the main idea? We have 4 choices. Having equal rights will cause everyone to profit, or doubling national wealth and conquering the stars should be among Americans' top priorities, or we will never defeat our enemies if we do not have equal rights, or the last one, for the good of the nation, Americans must unite to fix unjust policies. The text normally is talking about American democracy and how citizens behave and benefit from their rights. So what is the main idea that the second paragraph is talking about? We need to read the text and see which could be the best main idea of this passage. Another thing that you have to be able to do is to summarize a text. By summarizing, we mean finding the main ideas of the passage. So an example of such a question would be, what is the most accurate summary of this article? That is, summarizing the whole article. We have 4 choices always. The author is a lifelong traveler. This could summarize the text. Or the author believes that minor hassles are meaningless, or the author advocates travel abroad as an educational tool, or the author never takes anything for granted. So we need to understand the text and see which one summarizes the whole passage. And then we have understanding relationships between ideas or characters in a passage. For example, we have a question here which says, what is the best description of Kate's feelings towards her brother? According to her behavior and to the account that we have been given in the passage, we should understand whether Kate is disaffected and disinterested in her brother, or she strives to entice Lennox to become more social with uneven results, or she is malicious towards Lennox while he is bored with her, or she is in awe of Lennox's formidable ego. Of course, we need to understand a few of these terminologies, like formidable, in awe, malicious, strives, uneven, disaffected. So we need to figure out the meaning of these words in order to be able to answer the question. Okay, next thing we have another example of understanding relationships. For example, this one says, based on the passage, which choice best describes the relationship between Pluto's reclassification and the reaction of the public? And we have 4 choices. Only one is the best answer. Remember that the answer is clear in the passage. All you have to do is to read carefully and see which one would be the best answer. Okay, next we have interpreting words and phrases in context. This could be an easy task if you are familiar with the use of words and their context. For example, here it says, based on the context, remember, and be careful with the question, depending or based on the text, not according to your knowledge or in general. So based on the text, the word currency most probably means one of these choices. If this was isolated from the text, we would normally quickly answer that currency means money. But if we read the text, we will understand whether the text is talking about money or something else. So according to the text, what does the word currency mean? Either money, exchange, community, or expression. Another example would be, based on the text, bundled most closely means, and the same thing. You may know the meaning of the word bundled, but you have to answer the question according to the text. And then we have analyzing word choice. That is, why does the writer choose this word and not another word? For example, here it says, what is the general tone of the article? Incensed, delighted, unqualified, or distressed. By tone, we mean the writer's character while writing. That is, how does he feel? What is his attitude towards a certain topic or issue that is being discussed in the passage? So according to what you have read, can you decide on the tone of the writer? Was he incensed, delighted, unqualified, or distressed? Again, it's the text that gives us the answer. Another example of such question would be, which quote from the article best conveys the author's tone? Knowing the tone, for example, that he was delighted or distressed, which phrase or quotation from the text conveys this tone? And here you have different choices. The Harry Potter books rank among the best ever written. As you see, this one is put between quotation marks because it is taken from the text. So does this sentence explain the tone of the writer or not? Or due to your lack of research and clearly unsound opinions? Or I'm canceling my subscription, or the exclusion is an unqualified travesty. So we need to guess the tone of the passage depending on the choices that we have here. Which one best describes the tone of the writer? Then we have another characteristics that you have to be capable of is to analyze the overall text structure. For example, you have a question here. What is the primary effect of this internal dialogue on the structure of the text as a whole? The internal dialogue, that is a quote from the text, what is its role on the structure of the text as a whole? We know that the structure of the text always starts with an introduction, then with a developmental body, and ends with a conclusion. So the question here, the question here says the dialogue, the role of the dialogue in the text in relation to the whole structure of the text. Here it says the internal dialogue establishes Bluebell as a sympathetic character and invites the reader to admire her master plan, or it describes or establishes Bluebell, that is the character, as a foolish character deserving of mockery and invites the reader to laugh at her, or it establishes an arc for plot and character development, or it establishes the passionate love story sure to ensure between Bluebell and Charming. So here, depending on the position of the dialogue, we would guess whether it is an introduction or a development or a conclusion. Next, we have analyzing part and whole relationships. That is, what is the relation of a part to the whole? It's more or less the same as the previous one. Here it says, what is the purpose of the first sentence in the first selection? Is it to provide a thesis statement for a larger argument, or to demonstrate Lippitat's feelings about bees, or to establish a conflict between bees and humans, or to flesh out a character? So what is the role of the first sentence in the whole passage? And then we have analyzing points of view. You need to be able to analyze the point of view, that is the opinion of the writer. An example, the author's perspective or opinion in this piece is that of a social reformer on a crusade, or a medical professional dispensing advice, or a scholar exposing bedrocks of hypocrisy, or an observer interested in scientific integrity. Again, here we need to understand the writer's opinion and then make an analogy to this opinion. Is it the same as a social reformer, or a medical professional, or a scholar, or an observer? Okay, next we have analyzing text purpose, that is the intention of the writer. What does the writer intend from this text? Here we have a question. What is First Lady Obama's purpose in giving this talk? We have a text about the talk of Lady Obama, and the question asks you, what is the purpose behind this talk? Either to inform the nation about a major problem facing girls and women worldwide, or to criticize the mishandling of an international crisis, or to persuade the members of this institute to contribute funds for the amelioration of this issue, or to spur greater involvement among key players poised to redress the issue of girls' neglected educations worldwide. Again, we need to read the talk in order to be able to decide which one is the best answer. What I'm trying here to do is to familiarize you with the types of questions that you may expect in your exam. And then we have analyzing claims and counterclaims. Claims or arguments, counterclaims or counter-arguments. That is the writer's opinion or idea or claim that he wants to express in his passage. An example here, what is Le Guin's central claim or idea or opinion or suggestion or whatever in the text? So the question asks about the central claim of Le Guin, either that men abuse their power, or that victimhood is a physically and emotionally untenable situation, that every person should strive to define themselves as they want, or that to be human is to be doomed to fail. Again, this is not a direct question. You need to understand the aim of the writer in order to be able to answer such type of questions. Next, we have another example of analyzing claims and counterclaims. This one says, which line from the text provides the best counterclaim to Le Guin's central assertion? Now, we need to find something that contradicts Le Guin's opinion. Again, from the text, we are going to see which line in the text contradicts or counterclaim Le Guin's opinion. And you have 4 choices, which are all taken from the passage, but only one serves as a counterclaim to Le Guin's central opinion or claim. Next, we have assessing reasoning or thinking. That is, we need to decide how reasonable the writer was in his writing of the passage. Here we have an example. What is the writer's reasoning behind the claim that the interview is a poor vehicle through which to express outrage at North Korea's various abuses of human rights? So here, the writer claims that interview is a poor vehicle. So what is his reasoning behind this? Is it A, the film is slightly racist and thus inappropriate, or the film is not funny and thus is inappropriate, or the film is a comedy and not a meaningful stand, or the film will be overly sympathetic to the North Korean regime? Again, we need to see which one would be a reasonable step towards the claim that the interview is a poor vehicle through which to express outrage at North Korea's various abuses of human rights. One of these choices is the answer. Again, we cannot determine. We have to refer back to the passage in order to be able to answer this question. And then we have analyzing evidence or proof. An example of this would be, what is the author's main source of support for his central claim that the film Love actually is anti-romantic? It's the same as the previous one. Here we need to see the main source of support or the reasoning for this central claim. What evidence does the writer give to support his claim that love actually is anti-romantic? Unlike other films, it doesn't accurately portray relationships, or the film offers up 3 disturbing lessons about love, or the film is about love at first sight, which is an unrealistic concept, or the film emphasizes physical attraction over everything else. Again, it's the text that gives us the answer. And then we move to paired text, where you have 2 passages and questions about them and the relationship between the 2 texts. For example, here we have a question that says, what is the best way to characterize the difference between text 1 and text 2? What is the difference between the 2 texts? Either one is persuasive while the other is purely informative, or one contains much scientific jargon whereas the other is highly descriptive, or whether one provides general information about the scientific context while the text 2 gives details a phenomenon specific to that context, or text 1 is a call to action whereas text 2 is clearly written to increase awareness. Again, you need to understand the 2 passages and see how they differ. Another example says, both texts can be said to have the aim of. In this case, they should have one particular aim that is clear in both passages. Or Both text 1 and text 2 contain unfamiliar words and phrases. What is the approach these texts take to defining these phrases? How do the two passages react to certain phrases or unfamiliar words and phrases? How does the two texts approach the new or the unfamiliar words and phrases? For example, we can say that both texts consistently define every unfamiliar phrase they use, which could be true, or text 1 consistently defines phrases, whereas text 2 defines some phrases and lets the reader infer the meaning of others, or text 1 does not define relevant phrases, whereas text 2 does, or neither text adequately explains the scientific phrases it uses. Again, we need to see the two passages and see which one explains and which one does not explain, or whether none of them describes unfamiliar words, or they both define the new words. Again, it's dependent on the passage. We need to see the text in order to answer this question. Or we have another example. These two passages are best read together because the two define and explain text 1, text 2 defines and explains text 1, or text 2 gives a reason for a phenomenon found in text 1, or they give two oppositional sides of one story, or text 1 contains a general picture of a phenomenon, while text 2 details a specific feature of this phenomenon. Again, we need to see the text in order to answer these questions. And now we have what we call quantitative information. By quantitative information, we mean information that is included in graphs and tables and charts and things like that. Now here it says, based on the first graph, what percentage of 5-year-olds believe in Santa Claus? Choices, nearly 70%. Again, these quantitative information is found in the graph, and you need to understand how to read a graph or a chart or a table. Or it says here, what does the inclusion of this map show about poverty in North Korea? And you have the 4 different choices. Or what is the relationship between the two graphs? You may also be asked to explain and see the difference between the two graphs. For example here it says both graphs depict the same trend. In all choices we have both graphs depict the same trend. So this is true, but they differ in the second half of the question. That belief in Santa peaks between the ages of 5 and 8, or that children under 5 are more likely to believe in Santa, or that belief in Santa is correlated with belief in the tooth fairy, or that belief in Santa is correlated with religion. So we know that the two graphs depict the same trend, which is believing in Santa. But how do they differ? It depends on how we read the graphs. So that's all for the time being for the components of the reading section and the types of questions. Let's move quickly to the writing and language section and see examples of the questions that will be expected here. For example, we have in the writing and language paper, we'll test your knowledge of conventional English, including tenses. You will have questions on tenses, for example, choices, and you see whether to use the present or the past or the future. It depends on the context, or the parts of speech, either to use a noun or an adjective or an adverb, depending on the paragraph, or the word choice, which one to use instead of the one given, and punctuation, which is very critical here in the SAT. You have to differentiate between the use of commas, periods, exclamation marks, semicolon, colons, and things like that. And also you need to see the organizational structure and other things, of course. So let's see a few examples of the writing and language paper. Here it says, which is the best revision of sentence 3? You have a sentence, which is number 3, and you need to give a better revision of the sentence. How can you rephrase it in other words? And you have choices. Or, where would this sentence best fit within the given passage? You are given a sentence and you have to define which position would most fit this sentence. After sentence 1 or before sentence 1, after sentence 2 or before sentence 4, you have to read the paragraph and decide on its organizational structure and see where the sentence would most fit. Here is an example. Here you have a text and number 1, 2, and 3, and 3 questions here. So for example, number 1 says R is underlined, and the question is either no change, that is you keep it as it is, or you change R with is, or has been, or would be. You see here that we have a choice of tenses or even agreement between subjects and verb. So here it says the demand for primary medical service is or are or has been or would be. And number 2, one possible solution is to elevate more medical schools. And you have question on elevate, whether you keep it as it is or you change it with interest or incentivize or expect. And number 3, they're choosing the more lucrative specialties, either to keep it as it is or to change it with to choose the more lucrative specialties or the more lucrative specialties or the more lucrative specialties they might choose. Remember, in the SAT, most answers require the simplest and easiest ways to convey a meaning. Well, I think this is all for this section. I hope I wasn't very long, and hope to see you in other videos. And I would like to thank you for watching and wish you all the best. Thank you very much.